Hey Spuddies, PotatoMcWhiskey here, and welcome to our Sweden first look, first analysis video. I actually had an error during recording, so I've already watched and given my analysis, and then I realized, oh, the sound was disabled on my microphone, which felt pretty bad. But we'll quickly watch through the video, and then I'll give you all my thoughts in one big chunk.
Kristina leads Sweden in Civilization 6 Gathering Storm. She became Queen of Sweden at the age of 6 and is remembered for her intelligence, strong will, and her interest in the arts and sciences. Sweden's unique ability is Nobel Prize. When Sweden is present in a game, all civilizations can engage in 3 Nobel Prize competitions in the World Congress.
So one thing to note about the Nobel Prize is that Sweden also generates extra diplomatic favor from earning great people. So she's going to have an edge in winning this, which means she's going to be able to get certain great scientists more reliably, depending on how that works in the Gathering Storm expansion. A couple of interesting thoughts is that it's going to be sort of almost a counterpick to pick civilizations with good diplomatic favor generation into Sweden so that you can compete with the Nobel Peace Prizes. And it's also going to be an interesting position for civilizations who have kind of built a couple of theater squares, but not really enough to earn great artists. This could be a way in which Sweden actually helps her opponents by giving them the ability to fill up those slots earlier than they otherwise would have, or perhaps at all. And then on the flip side of that, you could be a civilization that has completely neglected theater squares, and you could end up with great artists that are completely useless to you. This is a very interesting ability, and I think it has the potential to have really, really interesting outcomes when it comes to how players are going to have to adapt to the situations that the consequences of the Nobel Peace Prize will leave them in, like the consequences of the situation that the Nobel Peace Prize will leave them in. A very interesting ability. I'm kind of excited to see how this plays out, not only in single player, but I think this would be a very interesting ability in multiplayer. Players would have to kind of make the decision whether or not they want to play around it. And also the Great Engineer there as a potential runner-up prize is very, very interesting. Okay. So let's go ahead. Now, I'm not really sure how the diplomatic thingies work. Does the leader get the top 2 or like the top 3? Because I remember in Civilization 5, if you won the sort of World Congress competition, like the whatever it was, like the International Space Station, you got the top 3 prizes. You got first, second, and third, whereas I'm not really sure how that works in Civ 6, so we'll have to see. But if the winner gets all 3 of these, that's pretty crazy.
When Sweden is present in a game, all civilizations can engage in 3 Nobel Prize competitions in the World Congress. Sweden also receives additional points towards great scientists or great engineers from universities and factories, and
so that's actually a really interesting ability because universities and factories tend to be something you build when you're going for a tourism game. And right now, again, I've already seen all this, but I'm pretty sure Sweden is like a premier tourism civ. But she does it in a very different and interesting way. Getting extra great engineer points is actually really, 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 really nice, particularly from factories, although you typically want to get them earlier than that for a tourism game. But even so, getting extra great scientist and great engineer points is because there are a few key engineer and great scientists that you want to grab when you're going for a tourism win. Typically, there's one great scientist who gives you it's like science per, what is it called? Science per every archaeological artifact in an archaeological museum, and then automatically themes them or something. I can't remember exactly off my head, or else it multiplies the tourism from them. Really, really powerful, really, really nice. That's a particularly good, great scientist you're going to want to get. And then just getting great scientists in general is going to help you out, because typically one of the things that you lack the most in a tourism game is science. So if you can get it someone like Isaac Newton to give you the +2 science on universities, which you're already planning to build because you're Sweden, and then maybe get a great engineer who boosts your factories, and then also get the great engineers to help you build the key wonders for a tourism victory. Very interesting abilities. These are, and this is kind of like a lot of players might not see how this helps Sweden actually become an even better theater tourism victory civ. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering why my voice is kind of gravelly, it's because I'm sick right now, and I figured, what the hell, I'll still make this video. But yeah, yet another, might not seem like it, but it's another buff towards your tourism game. Although you can kind of also use this to transition into a science game if you need to.
Gains favor when they earn a great person. Their unique improvement is the Open Air Museum. They may only build one per city, and it provides loyalty. It also provides culture and tourism for each different terrain type on which a Swedish city has been settled.
So that's an interesting ability. I think it is, again, sort of geared towards the more tourism game. Although there is something to be said that these are actually quite helpful if you are if you're going for a non-tourism game, for example, like a science game, you tend to actually lack in culture. It's one of those things. When you're going for a scientific victory, you tend to lack in culture, and when you're going for a culture victory, you tend to lack in science. So this is actually useful when you're going for a scientific victory because it's going to give you the ability to sort of increase your culture income, which is actually quite important when you're going for a scientific victory, and sort of vice versa. It's also really good for your tourism victory just because it's more culture, more science, more tourism. So pretty powerful improvement. Is it super powerful? I think it's going to really be situational dependent. I think from my estimation, it looks like you're going to be getting +2 culture per unique type of terrain you settled on. So for example, if you settle on tundra, unless it's +1 per, if it's +1 per, this isn't very viable. But if it's +2 per, I think this is quite viable and quite strong, because you can typically in a game you can at least settle 3 fairly easily. Like desert, plains, grassland is pretty common, and very, very common is desert, plains, grassland, and tundra. Like you're almost always going to have that as the ability. So getting these to +8 culture makes them really, really powerful.
Sweden's unique unit is the Karelian. This anti-cavalry unit is unlocked at the Renaissance era. It receives additional strength for unused movement points and is faster than similar units.
So what it looks like is it might not, it says 2 of 3, but what the unit actually has is probably something like 2.25 of 3, and it looks like the combat strength calculator rounds up. So you get, for every 1 movement you have left over, you get you get +3 combat strength. So actually, if you have a great, I don't see they have a base higher movement speed, so they just have a natural +9 combat strength when they haven't moved. If you get a great general in on top of that, it could be another +3. And then there's that improvement logistics, which is a unique card that gives another +1 movement to units in your own territory. So you could easily hit +15 combat strength on these Karelians. And then with roads, you'll be able to move them around and do a lot of damage, or just park them still and use them really, really, really effectively as defensive units. So kind of feels a little bit more like a defensive ability. I'm not sure. I'm curious how this interacts with ending the turn and whether or not this applies on the defense. I would be very, very interested to see how that works. Some testing required, but definitely a unit that looks like it's going to be reasonably strong. And if the plus combat strength applies on the defense, it means when an enemy attacks you, particularly with a melee unit, which typically counters the anti-cavalry units, you're going to have a little bit of combat strength to mitigate that +10 bonus they tend to have against you. So that's pretty powerful.
Faster than similar units. Christina's unique ability is Minerva of the North. Buildings with at least 3 great work slots and wonders with at least 2 great work slots are automatically themed when they have all their slots filled. Also, she can construct the Queen's Bibliothque.
We'll talk about that in a second. I want to talk about this ability. This ability is really, really powerful. Having automatically themed art museums, and I'm not sure if it applies to archaeological museums, but it sounds like the wording is that it doesn't. We'll have to double check on that. But even just applying to art museums tend to be a little bit weaker than archaeological museums, and this actually kind of puts them back on par with archaeological museums, even without the extra boost to tourism that you can get from that great scientist. There are policy cards that are easier to boost your great artworks with, and you can get them online a little bit quicker than you can with your archaeological museums. So this is very, very, very powerful. In particular, some of the really interesting things is it kind of changes the relationship that Sweden has with some early game wonders, like, for example, the Apadana and the Great Library. I think there's also some buildings and some upgrades you can do to buildings with some great people that give them extra slots. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's going to work. I think there's a great person who adds 3 slots to a bank. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there are ways to add there is at least one way that I know of, and I don't know if it adds enough great work slots, but the potential is there for this to generate a lot of culture and tourism. So this is, I feel like this is a top tier ability, and when you put it in hand with the next ability, it's even better.
Construct the Queen's Bibliothque in the Government Plaza, granting.
So the Queen's Bibliothque, I'm not going to let her talk about it. I'm going to just talk about it straight away. The Queen's Bibliothque is an extremely powerful mid-game government building. It doesn't replace any of them, but you can build it instead of like the Foreign Ministry, the Intelligence Agency, and the Grand Master's Chapel. And typically in a tourism game, you're going to go for the Intelligence Agency just because it's a way to get an extra spy, which can be used to generate extra resources and can be used to block other people's win conditions. The Queen's Bibliothèque is really, really powerful. It provides you +2 with each cultural great person points per turn, and it also gives you the ability to store 2 of their great works in it. In combination with Pingala's new promotion, I believe it's Pingala who's getting the new promotion that gives you extra 100% tourism from great works, and on top of the fact that if you have 3 great works inside this building, it will be getting automatically themed as per her previous ability. This is going to give Sweden a source of tourism that no other civilization has, and that's one of the running themes with Sweden here. Looks like she has a lot of really, really powerful bonuses towards not only a diplomatic but also a tourism victory. So she seems like she's really, really powerful. I'm really liking. I would say she's probably a top tier, if not the top tier tourism civ in the game right now.
Additional slots for great works. The key to unlocking Sweden's cultural power is settling cities across all terrain types and filling them with open-air museums. Be sure to attract as many great artists, musicians, and writers as you can, and you'll be set for a culture victory. Sweden is also a strong contender in the diplomatic game, and each great person will give them another edge in the World Congress. Will your legacy be recorded by painter and poet?
Okay, great. Let's go ahead and jump to the screen. Let's jump to the screen where she talks about all the abilities in one place. And let's have a moment to talk about this. So she's got Minerva of the North. Buildings with at least 3 great work slots and wonders with at least 2 are automatically themed when they have all their slots filled. She may construct the Queen's Bibliothèque in the Government Plaza. Extremely powerful ability. Makes it easier for you to generate tourism that other civilizations would have to work to get. So you're going to have more tourism earlier because your buildings are going to be themed earlier. It allows you to gain more value from buildings that other civilizations can't, or wonders in particular. The Queen's Bibliothèque is a source of tourism that no other civilization can get because you can build it in your capital in conjunction with the late game one that gives you +4 great work slots, and then use the Pingala promotion to multiply that tourism. So no other civilization can get that sort of level of tourism in a single city. So it's kind of a roundabout way to get extra tourism. So she has a bonus towards generating more tourism that other civilizations can't get, and a bonus towards having an easier time getting tourism that other civilizations would have to work harder to get. So this is a solid tourism bonus, I feel. But additionally, it can actually be quite a good, like for example, the Great Library, if you do go for a scientific win, and they do have some bonuses towards winning scientifically. I'll talk about those in a moment. The extra theming, like typically when you're going for a scientific victory, your weakness is going to be culture, and typically when you're going for a culture victory, your weakness is going to be science. These bonuses here, if you can get an early great writer when you're going for a culture science victory, you can get that multiplied if you went for the Great Library, for example. So these are some pretty powerful bonuses, and actually quite flexible too in how you can use them. Then we also have the Nobel Prize. Sweden gains 50 diplomatic favor. That's a lot of diplomatic favor when earning a great person. Whoa, that's a lot of diplomatic favor, particularly because Sweden's going to be earning a lot of great people if they're going for a tourism victory. Like, you've got 3 great people lines that you're going to be guaranteed pulling off of, and then you've got 2 additional ones that you can make use of, the engineer and the great scientist, because this ability actually gives you extra points towards those. And then you could also splash out for maybe a couple of admirals, maybe a couple of great merchants, maybe a great general if you're lucky and you build an early encampment, maybe. So the potential for this to generate a lot of diplomatic favor is actually insane as far as I can tell, and looking at the values of how you use diplomatic favor, this looks really, really powerful. Sweden is definitely going to be a powerhouse when it comes to sort of having control of the World Congress and the tourism game Really, really powerful. And then there's also the 3 unique World Congress competitions that Sweden's going to have, just more stuff to win that also generates her more great people, which generates her more diplomatic favor. So she's just, as far as I can tell, Sweden is pretty insane when it comes to the combination of tourism and diplomatic favor, just from these 2 abilities alone. Then we have the Karelian, which, yeah, you can see there, it's +3 combat strength per unused movement, and it replaces the pike and shot, and it's faster than it. Pretty decent. Not gonna... I think it's... it definitely feels like a defensive unit. You can just park it somewhere and it's nice and safe. But, it has offensive applications too. Obviously, typically, I would find the spear line to be one of the weakest lines, but it does have a +1 movement perk, which makes it even more powerful. And then you can consider the ability for logistics and a great general. There could be potential of upwards of like +18 combat strength from movement here, which is really, really powerful. I would say this is more of a defensive unit, not really going to be a game changer, not like the Impy. The Impy is just broken. We've got the Queen's Bibliothque. This gives you another way to generate more tourism in a single city because you can use multipliers with Pingala's new promotion. I'm pretty sure it's Pingala. It used to be on Reina. Reina used to have the promotion, but I'm pretty sure it's on Pingala now. So this has the potential for you to be able to just generate more tourism than any other civilization in the game. So that's really, really powerful. And then again, you've got the Open Air Museum, which gives you +2 loyalty per turn and +2 culture and tourism for each type of terrain: snow, tundra, desert, plains, or grassland. So that's up to 10 culture and tourism per turn, but I would say 10 culture and tourism per turn per city is actually pretty powerful. That's like on par with building Renaissance walls and then getting a computing. That's actually better than building Renaissance walls if you can get that. And I'd say in most games, building an open air museum is going to be on par with building full Renaissance walls in your cities, minus the science, for a much smaller investment. Because in most games, you're going to be able to settle at least 3 different terrain types. You're going to be able to settle plains and grassland, and then either desert or tundra. And then in a lot of games, you're going to be able to settle all 5 in reality, because I often spawn near desert, tundra, and snow with plains and grassland. So getting +10 is going to be quite easy. It's going to be very powerful. And yet again, it's another source of tourism that no other civilization in the game can get, that Sweden just has over them. So my sort of overall analysis of Sweden is that they have a lot of ways to get tourism easier than other civilizations and more tourism than other civilizations. So she's going to be incredibly powerful towards a tourism game. I would actually go as far as to say she's, if not, she could be the top tier tourism civ in the game right now. It really depends on how they change the tourism victory, but if she was in Rise and Fall right now, she would be the best tourism civ in the game, in my opinion. But with how the things are changing, I'm not sure how that's going to influence things. I think I would be very surprised if she was not in like the top 3 tourism civs, because just the sheer amount of tourism she can generate and the sheer amount of bonuses that she has towards controlling the diplomatic congress or the world congress, which gives her a lot of power to be able to hurt other civilizations indirectly without having to go to war, which kind of compensates for her ability to not really have an ability to go to war over other civilizations. Like someone like the Zulus has a lot of nice bonuses for going to war, for example, whereas Sweden doesn't really have that. But if she can play defensively, build up, get a lot of diplomatic favor, get a lot of great people, she's going to be able to sort of dominate the game diplomatically and with tourism. So I'm very excited to play Sweden. I think she's going to be incredibly powerful. I think she's going to be a lot of fun to play. And I think it's really nice to see a civilization that isn't just like, here's a really early unit that can snowball the game. It's really nice to see them digging in and making abilities that are interesting. I think the most interesting part of this is the Queen's Bibliothque. I think that really appeals to me. When I say most interesting, what I really mean is like when I say most interesting, I think it's like the most powerful individually with regards to a thing, like of all of her abilities. Like when you take these abilities in conjunction with each other, these are obviously much more powerful. But this, I feel like, is the thing that stands out as being really, really powerful. Having 6 slots for great works that can be multiplied by 100% and any other modifiers that you have is pretty damn powerful. So I'm pretty interested to see how that pans out. So I do apologize for being sick while I was making this video. There's really not much I can do about it. So I'll let Sweden play you out. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I love you all very much, and I'll see you next time.
Will your legacy be recorded by painter and poet? How will you leave Sweden? In Sid Meier's Civilization 6, Gathering Storm.
I love you all. Bye-bye.